What happens when the unbreakable, the fortress everyone considered invincible, suddenly and spectacularly shatters overnight? Imagine a town, long heralded as an impenetrable bastion, collapsing not after months of attrition, but in less than 48 hours. This is far more than a localized defeat. It is a seismic event whose shockwaves reverberate across Eastern Europe's entire security architecture. Let's set the stage. Think of Iskra, once the very bedrock of Ukrainian defense in the east. For month after month, its fortified lines and deep reserves of morale were trusted by commanders, analysts, and foot soldiers alike. For those on the ground and those watching from afar, Iskra was more than a place. It was a symbol of resilience. That's why its abrupt fall has sent tremors through military headquarters, political cabinets, and civilian communities across the region. This is not a minor bullet point in a forgotten war diary. The collapse of Iskra is a watershed moment, forcing leaders in Kyiv, Moscow, and even Western capitals to urgently reconsider their assumptions about modern warfare, defensive doctrine, and regional stability. The world has seen historic pivots like this before. Think of the fall of Dien Bien Phu in Vietnam in the mid-20th century, or the collapse of the Maginot Line in France during the early days of the Second World War. Each event forced a radical rethinking of what was thought to be possible, and Iskra's fate is no different. If we misread what happened here, we risk missing a fundamental turning point, a moment that could reshape the balance of power, redefine how future wars are fought, and redraw the security map of Eastern Europe. Understanding Iskra's fate is now essential for anyone concerned with the outcome of this war, and for anyone who cares about what comes next in the region. So let's break down how this formidable stronghold fell with such breathtaking speed, and what its loss sets in motion for every side involved. First, we need to understand why Iskra mattered so profoundly, and how the very qualities that made its defenses legendary may have led to their undoing. The answers begin with the town's unique geography and its pivotal role on the front lines. For months, anticipation grew. Unprecedented defenses were constructed. Yet when the final reckoning came, it was total collapse, swift and absolute. Iskra was never just a dot on a map. For months, it served as the backbone of Ukrainian resistance, a quiet town transformed into a fortress. Deep trenches snaked through its outskirts, reminiscent of the defenses at Verdun during the First World War. Bunkers for ammunition were built to exacting specifications. Interlocking defensive rings created a latticework of protection. Every detail was meticulously engineered, all designed to withstand siege and repel even the fiercest assaults. Why such painstaking preparation? Iskra's position was critical. It served as the central artery for supplies and communications along more than 100 kilometers of front line, a distance roughly equivalent to the stretch from London to Birmingham. Every crate of ammunition, every ration of food, every drop of fuel for dozens of positions flowed through Iskra. Lose this hub, and the entire defensive web could unravel in a matter of days, much like when the ancient city of Byzantium finally fell and the Byzantine Empire's networks collapsed overnight. Western military doctrine was woven into every layer of Iskra's defense. NATO-grade equipment, advanced training, and real-time intelligence shaped its fortifications. Military analysts from think tanks across Europe and North America called it a modern showpiece, a fortress built to resist even the most sophisticated attacks. In many ways, Iskra was the testbed for everything the West had taught Ukraine about static defense. That's what makes its abrupt fall so staggering. This is not simply the loss of a town. It is a logistical catastrophe, one that exposes more than 100 kilometers of front line, disrupts the lifeline for countless Ukrainian units, and throws operations into disarray. The suddenness of the fall recalls the collapse of Singapore in the Second World War, a city fortress whose defeat shocked the world and forced a complete reappraisal of strategy in the Pacific. The stakes here could not be higher. When a linchpin like Iskra collapses, it sends shockwaves through every position it once shielded. Soldiers across the region now feel the ground shift beneath their boots, as entire fronts teeter on the verge of collapse. The psychological impact cannot be overstated. But how could a fortress, months in the making and reinforced by Western expertise, fall in mere days? The answer is more complex than brute force. Something inside Iskra was quietly, fatally compromised. To truly understand Iskra's sudden downfall, we must look beyond the obvious. The seeds of collapse were sown long before the first enemy breach. History offers parallels. Think of the Trojan horse, a city undone not by outside assault, but by infiltration and subterfuge from within. A fortress means nothing if the enemy already hides inside its walls. For months before Iskra's collapse, Russian intelligence moved like shadows through the town. They studied daily routines, mapped supply chains, and recorded every troop rotation. Each delivery, each shift, every lull in vigilance was quietly logged. The Russians did not need to storm the gates. They were already inside, watching and waiting for the moment to cut the heart out of the defense. The opening blow was invisible. Russian electronic warfare smothered communications, blinding and deafening the defenders instantly. Ukrainian command posts lost touch with frontline units. Orders vanished into static, leaving isolated squads stranded and guessing in a sudden, suffocating silence. It was more than chaos. It was deliberate isolation, calculated to paralyze the entire defense before the first shot was fired. This echoes the German blitzkrieg tactics of the Second World War, where speed, surprise, and disruption replaced attrition. Months of preparation had produced deep trenches, interlocking fields of fire, and Western-style fortifications. Yet these strongholds assumed a visible enemy, a frontal assault that defenders could see and counter. Instead, the attack came from within and all around, targeting their ability to organize, adapt, and respond. Under this new kind of pressure, the carefully built defenses collapsed with astonishing speed. Desperate commanders rushed reserves to patch new breaches, but each shift left another flank exposed. With every redeployment, the defense unraveled faster, like threads pulled from a fraying fabric. Failures multiplied in real time, and momentum slipped beyond anyone's control. It's reminiscent of the Austrians at Kasserine Pass in North Africa, where confusion and rapid redeployment led to a cascading defeat. Inside Iskra, morale crumbled. Exhausted troops, unable to resupply or rotate out, lost hope. Leaders were cut off, and relief became impossible. Surrender or retreat became the only options. In barely 48 hours, the stronghold that had repelled attacks for months simply dissolved, shocking even seasoned analysts of modern warfare. This is more than a single defeat. It is a signal fire for the future. Unless militaries worldwide adapt to these evolving tactics, they risk repeating the same failures, losing the strategic edge that decides wars. The method that toppled Iskra is not unique. Unless defenders learn and innovate, the next collapse may come even faster, just as France's static Maginot Line was outflanked by maneuver warfare in the last century. Iskra's fall is a warning to all modern armies. The rules of warfare are changing, and the cost of failing to adapt grows heavier with each new battle. In the Russo-Japanese War, the world saw how new tactics could humble even the most established militaries. Iskra's collapse may be the 21st century's equivalent. One domino falls. What else is set to topple? The fall of Iskra is no mere tactical setback. Rather, it is the linchpin ripped from a carefully engineered defense. With Iskra under Russian control, direct corridors now lead toward several of Ukraine's most critical strongpoints, positions that, until this moment, appeared nearly invincible. Each hard-won kilometer threatens to unravel an entire front that has been painstakingly stitched together over months. Russian forces, no longer constrained by former borders, can now surge into previously secure areas. Their advance exposes supply lines that once sustained scores of Ukrainian units, turning previously reliable roads and depots into liabilities. Ukrainian logistics stagger under the blow. Essentials must be rerouted, convoys risk ambush, and command must scramble to adapt in real time. Every attempt to bolster these breached sectors triggers new predicaments. Reinforcing one gap inevitably strips strength from another, deepening a cycle of overstretched defenses and multiplying vulnerabilities. What was once a stable, integrated grid now appears brittle and patchwork, a perilous condition against a relentless and flexible foe. This echoes the domino effect seen after the fall of Warsaw in the Second World War, when the entire Polish defense collapsed in a matter of days. Despite mounting evidence, discarded armor, intercepted radio chatter, and raw battlefield footage, Western media attempts to soften the blow. Official statements minimize the urgency, but ground-level images reveal the truth. Pallets of Western ammunition abandoned, defensive lines breaking in mere hours, and morale visibly eroding amid chaotic withdrawals. Videos circulating online show Ukrainian soldiers leaving behind not just weapons, but personal belongings in their haste, a stark sign of psychological defeat. The psychological shock is profound. Ukrainian commanders question their strategies, troops doubt their orders, and in distant capitals, alliance leaders quietly reconsider their commitments. It is not just ground that is slipping away, but confidence itself, among generals, policymakers, and allies suddenly forced to rethink the trajectory of the war. This uncertainty echoes the mood in Britain after Dunkirk. Victory is possible, but only if lessons are learned with brutal honesty. The fate of the entire front, and the leverage for any future peace, dangles in the balance. Decisions made here could reshape not just this campaign, but the order of Eastern Europe for a generation. As with the fall of the Berlin Wall, a single event can unleash consequences that are felt for decades. Yet amid the chaos, new pressures and opportunities emerge. The battle for control will now hinge on decisions made in the coming hours. Will Ukraine's commanders pivot to a more agile, decentralized defense? Will Russia press its advantage or overextend as others have in history? A fortress is only as strong as the mindsets within its walls. The fall of Iskra was more than shattered concrete or lost trenches. It was a brutal lesson in how stale thinking can unravel even the hardest defenses. Relying on old models and Western blueprints, Ukrainian commanders trusted that thick bunkers and deep ditches would hold the line. But they underestimated an enemy who learned, adapted, and sought out the blind spots that doctrine ignored. Static defense, no matter how well built, became a snare. The attackers did not simply batter the walls. They studied, waited, and pounced where routines grew predictable, where communication faltered, and where spirits flagged. Heavy fortifications bred overconfidence, hiding cracks in discipline and morale. This is a pattern seen throughout history, from the fall of Constantinople to the defeat of the French at Dien Bien Phu. The gravest failure was neglecting the human element. Exhausted troops went unrelieved, morale withered, and uncertainty spread through the ranks. When orders ceased and resupply failed, even elite units lost their resolve. Morale is not just an afterthought. It decides whether soldiers stand or fall when everything else breaks down. In the past, armies like Napoleon's Grande Armée collapsed as much from morale crises as from enemy action. The enemy's real advantage lay in intelligence and surprise. Careful infiltration and months of surveillance let them strike with pinpoint accuracy, crippling command, and freezing any coordinated response. In modern conflict, dominance of information and the element of surprise can outweigh sheer numbers or firepower. The United States' success in Operation Desert Storm was due in large part to information dominance. Iskra's defenders, by contrast, were blinded. Iskra's collapse warns every military. Clinging to static doctrine or neglecting the human factor invites disaster. Future defense depends on adaptability, information security, and psychological fortitude. Otherwise, today's fortresses risk becoming tomorrow's ruins. Practical steps for modern defenders include building redundant communication systems, rotating troops more frequently, and training leaders to improvise under pressure. As the smoke clears and borders shift, a single question lingers. What truly determines the fate of a stronghold, the strength of its walls, or the adaptability and resilience of its defenders? The answer may shape the future of the entire front. When a single spark redraws the battlefield, Will you see the new lines before anyone else does? The loss of Iskra is not merely the fall of a distant town. It is an earthquake across the Eastern Front, a shattering of old certainties, and the birth of a harsher, more unpredictable era in modern warfare. For months, Iskra was the anchor of Ukrainian defenses. Its trenches, ammunition stores, and fortified lines were built on doctrine and faith in resilience. Yet, in under 2 days, these defenses fractured, revealing how even the most praised strongholds can collapse swiftly under the pressure of coordinated intelligence, psychological warfare, and agile new tactics. This is a lesson as old as war itself, but one that must be relearned with every new conflict. Iskra's fall shatters the comforting illusion that setbacks are minor or quickly reversed. Instead, it rings out as a warning far beyond this region, echoing through command bunkers and government halls. This logistical hub's collapse threatens to unravel more than 100 kilometers of the front, endangering the lifelines and very survival of forces stretched thin in the east. The danger now is not only tactical, but existential. Those who fail to grasp the battlefield's new shape, who cling to comfortable doctrines or easy optimism, risk being swept away. The future will belong to those who adapt first, using intelligence networks, psychological leverage, and a willingness to rewrite every rule. The story of the Red Army's turnaround in the Second World War shows how adaptability can turn the tide even after devastating losses. If there is one lesson viewers should remember, it is this. The lines on the map are redrawn not just by force, but by how quickly you realize the game has changed. Adaptation is no longer a choice. It is survival. What happened at Iskra is the new blueprint. Those who ignore it may soon find themselves lost in the shadow of the next upheaval. To see what lies ahead, we must examine how this new style of war is already sending shockwaves across the region, forcing alliances to shift and compelling leaders to make decisions they never thought possible. In the coming weeks, watch not just for changes on the map, but for changes in doctrine, morale, and mindset. Because as history shows, it is not always the strongest who survive, but those who adapt fastest.